Welcome to week 10. Last week we talked about the origins of Rome. We talked about the development of the government system of the Roman Republic. This week we're going to talk about the expansion of Rome, how Rome transitions from being just a local city-state into an empire. Now, quick distinction here. We're going to talk about the Roman Empire to refer to the lands outside of Rome that the Romans rule. So when we talk about the Roman Empire, it's not necessarily that this empire is ruled by an emperor. It's still ruled by the Roman Republic, but we talk about these territories as an empire. So just as we have that clarification. When we read the legends about the origins of Rome, these legends that we covered in the last week's material, we read about the heroism with which the most famous Romans defended the city. So we have accounts of a Roman who very famously burned his hand in the fire to show that he was unafraid to sacrifice himself for Rome. We have another story of an individual Roman who stood on a bridge alone against an army, allowed the bridge to be destroyed behind him, and then leapt into the river. Again, he sacrificed himself in order to protect the city of Rome. We have the story of Cincinnatus, a famous Roman dictator, who was chosen as dictator. Remember, dictators were chosen in times of emergency. They were given special powers. He held those powers for just 16 days, and then he gave them up and returned to being a simple farmer. And so these stories show us how the Romans valued during this period the sacrifice of individuals. And it shows us that the Romans remembered that individuals were willing to sacrifice themselves for the Republic because they believed in the Republic. Now, in 396, the Romans defeated the Etruscan city of Veii and dramatically expanded the territory that they controlled. And so now you see Rome expanding beyond the territories of the local city. In 390, however, a raiding party of Celts called Gauls, so people from modern-day France, people from north of the Alps, came over the Alps into Italy and attacked Rome. And we're told that the Roman phalanx, which was a formation the Romans had adopted, probably from Greek influence, fled in terror from the terrifying attacks of the Gauls. And the Gauls sacked Rome, destroyed most of the original documents associated with the city, which is why we have to rely on the legends that we've been talking about. Eventually, the Gauls are driven off, but the Romans are forced to pay a significant ransom. In order to regain the city, they have to pay the Gauls a large amount of money. And there's talk that when they were weighing the amount of gold that the Romans had to pay, the Gauls used basically cheat scales, so the Romans would have to pay even more in gold. And when the Romans protested, one of the Gauls threw his sword on the scales and said, "Woe to the conquered." And so the message that this is sending is that the Romans have failed to defend their city. Now they can be subject to the harshest terms. They have no recourse because they were defeated. The Gauls are going to turn around and defeat them again. And so this experience, this traumatic experience, deeply affected the Romans. One, they were convinced that they never wished to be in this position again. And some suggested moving the city to a more defensible location. Rome is, yes, famously built on 7 hills, but those 7 hills are built around a river valley. It's not a naturally fortified location. It's not a location that's easy to defend. So some suggested moving the city. But the Romans felt tied to the Tiber River and to this place, and so they remained. But they strengthened their position. First, they reformed the military. And they adopted a system called the system of Maniples. This meant placing the more inexperienced troops at the front of the line, kind of as cannon fodder, but with the idea that you're not sacrificing your best troops. And so then if things go wrong, the best troops can kind of hold the line. Less experienced troops who've been driven off, they can regroup, and you can kind of get out of there to fight another day. Rather than putting your best troops at the front, if things go wrong, your best troops have got slaughtered, your less experienced troops don't know what to do. They also hired Greek stonemasons to build a giant wall called the Servian Wall around the city of Rome. And so again, this reflects some of the attributes of the Romans that we've talked about a little bit so far. One, that they are practical and pragmatic and flexible. And so they're adopting new strategies, finding solutions to problems, but also that there's a certain sense of resolution there that we're going to see emphasized again and again, especially this week. That the Romans are going to be flexible, they're going to be pragmatic, but they're also not going to change the location of the city of Rome. They're not going to give up on that. And so this means that in some ways, the Romans are resolute and determined in not changing some of the aspects that they thought were most important. Move on now to the next slide. The Romans also changed their strategy and tactics. Instead, they now adopted a policy that's called a policy of defensive aggression. So this meant whoever their most threatening neighbor was, they would go on the attack against them in order to prevent this kind of sack ever happening again. The sack of the city of Rome by the Gauls. And so people debate backwards and forwards. Did the Romans intend to build an empire? Did they have this sort of plan, large-scale plan of conquest? First we're going to conquer here, then we're going to conquer here, then we'll have conquered all of Europe. Or did they kind of do this by accident, where they felt threatened by someone, and so they defeated them, and then, oh, look, suddenly I ended up with an empire by accident? Really, it's somewhere in between, as is often the case. And so you can see how this policy of defensive aggression is, at least initially, primarily motivated by a desire to survive, but that in the end, it's going to become, you can see how this is going to lead to the Romans becoming more and more powerful. And so it took the Romans about 50 years to recover from the sack of the Gauls. Then, around the 340s, around the time that some of the government reforms that we were talking about last week have fully come into effect, they fight a series of Italian wars. They defeat the other towns that are ruled by Latin peoples, and then they fight a series of wars against the Samnite peoples further to the south. And so in the Samnite wars, although the Romans were initially defeated, they did not get up. They established the strategic keys to victory of controlling this territory. And in the end, they were able to defeat the Samnites by around 290. So this is a long period. This is a period of about 50 years fighting against the other Latin peoples and fighting against the Samnites. In these wars, the Romans emphasized their approach as benevolent conquerors. So they offered those who they conquered the right of private citizens, that is, the right to do business, the right to get married, just not the right to hold public office. And so this was a way of extending citizenship and incorporating new peoples into the role of the conquerors, or into the identity of the conquerors, that was really unheard of in this world at this time. The Persians were seen as benevolent conquerors, but they definitely didn't offer any type of citizenship to those who they conquered. And so this was something that was already beginning to set the Romans apart. They also emphasized this idea of Latinity. They emphasized what they held in common with the other Latin towns, their Latin heritage, and encouraged these towns to be obedient and faithful rather than bringing in soldiers and occupying this territory with an army. So the Romans are emphasizing this idea of benevolent conquest. What follows next is another great conflict at this period that's called the Pyrrhic War, in which for the first time the Greeks are coming into conflict with the Greek cities in southern Italy and with the Greek world of the eastern Mediterranean. Remember that there are Greek colonies on the eastern coast of Rome, and as Rome starts to expand, they start to see these as their most threatening aggressor now that they've conquered these other Italian city-states. And at the same time, these Greek city-states start to become more and more nervous about the Romans. And so they appeal to a ruler called Pyrrhus of Epirus. And Pyrrhus was the latest ruler of Macedon. Remember, we said that Alexander the Great's empire broke into 4 pieces. The northernmost part of those was Macedon, the old historic Greek empire of Philip and Alexander the Great. And Pyrrhus was the latest ruler of this empire. And Pyrrhus was very ambitious. He had ambitions for creating an empire like Alexander's, just focused towards the west. And so he brings a substantial army to Italy that includes elephants. Here we see the effects of kind of a reverse Hellenization. So Greek culture is being spread through the Middle East, but aspects of Asian culture is also coming to the Mediterranean. And Pyrrhus wins the first two battles, and the Romans are pretty shocked and scared of the elephants, but they refuse to give up. Even when it seems as though it's impossible to defeat this army and these incredible animals, they refuse to negotiate peace with Pyrrhus, and eventually Pyrrhus is the one who gives up. So he's winning these battles, but they're costing him a lot of men. Eventually, he decides he can't do this anymore. He gives up on trying to conquer the Romans, and he returns to Greece. By 268, the Romans had completed establishing control over the rest of southern Italy. They had established themselves not just a power within Italy, but a power within the Mediterranean. They had established diplomatic relations with the Ptolemaic dynasty, another post-Alexander dynasty in Egypt. The Roman soldiers during this period were amateur soldiers. They were farmers who were recruited to serve the army in times of war. The generals were only allowed to hold office for 1 year. This was to prevent a general from becoming too powerful. And so they lost more battles than they won. They lost more battles against Pyrrhus than they won, against the Samnites than that they won, and against the Latins. The reason that they won these wars was through persistence, and they never gave up. They continued to fight until the willpower of their opponent gave away, and because of their strategic strategies, their long-term strategic vision. So when they're fighting against the Samnites, they build roads that allow them to transport their armies more quickly, to take control of strategic points, and this helps them to be successful. The Romans were also seen as benevolent rulers. They mostly just weakened their enemies, made them into their allies. They provided them with protection against other potential conquerors. They didn't tax them as much as other conquerors. They gave them a share in the spoils from these wars. So Rome was not adding huge amounts of territory, but it was significantly increasing its manpower, and they were also establishing this message of persistence. And so the most important outcome of the Pyrrhic War in some ways is that those cities that had allied with Rome in Italy recognized that Rome doesn't go away. They recognized it's best to stick with the Romans because in the end, the Romans are going to win. If we had sold out to the Romans and fought alongside Pyrrhus, Pyrrhus had given up, the Romans probably would have taken pretty harsh measures against us. And so this is a very important part of establishing Rome's reputation. Its reputation for being flexible and pragmatic, but also this reputation for being resolute and determined and strategic and having a long-term vision that ends in victory.